Hello.
Hi there.
Hey.
Hello. How many do we need for a quorum?
4.
Okay. And then, so the people that are going to be termed out, is next meeting their last one?
Yes,
Okay,
and it'll also
That-
be Monica's
right, because she's not going
reapplying.
forward again. Okay. What does that leave us with?
That leaves you with 3 and an alternate.
Okay. I mean, hopefully we'll get new people. When would new people be available? Would it be the next meeting after that?
They would be appointed July 1st.
Okay. Has anyone contacted you about not coming tonight or anything? Okay. Well, we'll wait a little longer. We don't have a quorum yet. Hi, Manager Lewis.
Hi. Make sure nobody's emailed me.
Thank you.
Just Dave Lewis, and he's already here.
Okay. Oh, yeah. We have a quorum.
Sonia's online.
Yeah. Okay. Let's call this meeting to order. Will you please take roll, Ms. Willis?
Sure. Chair Green,
Present?
Vice Chair Watson,
Present.
Member Strom,
Present.
Member Dickerson, not present. Member Bowden, not present. Member Johnson, not present. Alternate member Tara.
Present.
And then we have Dave Lewis and myself as staff members. You do have a quorum with your alternate member. So Tara, you will be voting this evening unless someone else comes in.
Understood.
Are you able to do video, Member Redovid?
No, it's not really working.
All right, then for any votes, Ms. Willis, please go through the roll and ask. We'll do them audio. So is there let's start with approval of minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from March 15th?
Yep.
Thank you, Vice Chair Watson. And then Member Strom, was that a second? Thank you.
Yes, Tara.
We'll wait till Ms. Willis calls our names and then we'll state our votes.
Now, is this just for the 315? You can do them both at the same time.
Oh,
Unless
okay.
you
well,
want to make changes to them.
Does
that's the
anyone
other-
have? Yeah, I'll modify the motion then.
Well, actually, hold on. The person that made the motion and the seconder have to agree to include the minutes of 4/19/2022.
That's what I
So-
was gonna do. I was gonna ask them if they accept a friendly amendment to
Oh.
modify this motion on the table to cover both March 15th and April 19th minutes. Does that
Vice
work for
Chair.
you, Vice Chair Watson?
Yes,
And go ahead, Ms. Willis.
And Member Strom, are you good with that as a seconder?
Yes.
Okay,
Thank
all
you.
right, so Chair Green, are you in favor?
Yes.
Aye or nay? Vice Chair Watson, aye or nay?
aye,
Member Strom, aye or nay?
Aye.
Alternate member Reddivid, aye or nay?
Aye.
Okay,
Aye
so
on mine since I said yes.
that's fine. And then there's one more thing that I wanted to let you know, Chair Green, it's that even if a member is not present for whatever minutes are being approved, they can still vote on them. It's perfectly legal.
Okay. Yeah, I've heard mixed reviews on that, but I'm fine with going with that. So anyone can vote on minutes whether they were present. or
Any
not.
member can vote on minutes, whether
Any
they were
member-
present for the minutes or not.
Including an alternate who's voting because of necessity due to lack of quorum.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. So let's open the public forum.
We have no attendees.
Okay, so this was an opportunity for public to address us, but we don't have anyone present, so I'm not going to
Correct.
go through the rules. So we'll move past the public forum and into code enforcement significant events. Code Manager Lewis. We don't hear you. You're still muted.
That's like the catchphrase of the last 2 years.
Right?
So I was hoping we'd have everyone here, including council member, just to go over some statistics. The biggest telling thing that I can explain is that our number of cases did drop for the first quarter of 2022. Not that our workload has decreased, we just have we had an officer that was on modified duty due to an on-the-job injury, and I've mentioned this before, that she was crashed into stopped on Santa Fe by somebody going 60 miles an hour texting. So she wasn't able to be out and on patrol related to this specific first quarter. She is back to full duty, so we're very happy and welcomed her back to full duty a few weeks ago. And we're also lacking that full-time park ranger. So that is also another statistic, reason that our statistics are a little off. But if you were to average cases by code officer, we are still above where we should typically be if we were to do that per officer. You also see a new category. We didn't start collecting data related to park rules violation until we moved to the new RMS system. So that's why you'll see zeros in the park rules violation for the last 2 years, because we just started capturing that data. We had no need to capture that data previously, but because we are now enforcing a variety of park rules, from smoking to proper use of facilities, the number of people that can have a function without a permit. And I think I did mention our non-smoking policies, drone issues, anything that's involving with a variety of park rules. Playing golf is another one. We are currently capturing that data as well. We're also enforcing fishing licenses over at Centennial Park, which is another park rule. Although that is typically done by a state officer, our municipal ordinance says you have to have a fishing license, therefore it falls to our park rules to enforce that. And we really want to make sure that we are that we're being responsible stewards of our resources. And because the state does provide and pay for the stocking of that lake multiple times a year, we want to make sure that those folks that are fishing, one, are responsible, and two, that they also have paid to enjoy the privilege of fishing within our parks community. And that also just pays for the stalking. It pays for rescue services should they get lost in the mountains. And it also ensures that our wildlife is maintained to natural balance and order. Those are the only glaring things to point out with the statistics. You can also see where a majority of our time is spent. During the first quarter, it's usually typically snow removal. That will change over to next quarter, and the third quarter going into weed enforcement. And then animal control. Animal control consistently is about a third of our time to slightly over a third of our time. And that's because that is a huge health and safety issue for the city of Inglewood. It also incorporates at large within our off-leash privilege areas regarding rabies transmission, and just making sure that we thoroughly investigate any activities regarding animal fights, dangerous behaviors, that we make sure that we investigate all of those thoroughly. You can see that when I first started, we were mostly proactive, and with providing, I'm looking at the third page, which is page 12 of your packet, on how calls for service are received. When we started, we were purely reactive. Our calls for service were generated by the public or dispatch, and were not proactively done by code officers. Based off of new technology, utilizing hotspots, we are able to allocate additional staffing to meet the needs of our community and the expectations of our community. And you'll see that we are slightly over half of our calls for service are proactive. That means the case that we're generating was observed firsthand by a code officer. We may be driving down the street or an alley and observe a code violation, and we take the initial action. It was not reported by a citizen, or called in by dispatch, or referred to us by a citizen or another police officer. So I'm very pleased with that number, and I think that's consistent with my colleagues, most of my colleagues within the code enforcement realm. We want to target to be about 50% proactive and 50% calls for service. And I know the police department is also trying to be more proactive, and that's part of some of the things that are coming before council, because they just don't have the time with the call loads. We don't have an accurate number of officers to respond to calls for service. Let's see. And then I just broke things down by month so you could see kind of where we were trending. I'm not seeing anything unusual with any of our statistics. They are pretty typical, and I'm not seeing any big trends like we had seen before regarding trash accumulation or trash violations as a result of COVID, and some concerns with different trash hauling services and what was occurring this time last year. Is there any questions that you might have regarding the statistics?
Anybody else? I have a few. Does anyone? So
Carson, you cut out.
Yeah, we don't hear him anymore. Nothing. Your voice went electronic and then it cut out. Whoop, no.
Do you hear me now?
Now we
Yeah.
can, yeah, yeah.
I apologize. I guess I tried a new headset and it doesn't seem to be reliable. Code Manager Lewis, thank you. And yeah, I have a few questions. On the lowered number of cases, would that have mainly been just lower of officer initiated, or while the one officer was unable to be in the field, or were you able to still handle the full load that was incoming? Was it mainly officer initiated that was lower?
That's a great question. It is officer initiated. So when you're on modified duty, we had other officers that were taking calls for service. So if a citizen was calling to generate a call for service, It is always our goal to conduct an inspection within 3 to 7 business days. That did not change. It is the officer initiated proactive work that was being done that really suffered during not having a park ranger and not having a full-time code officer that could go out and do inspections. They were office work only.
That's what I figured. Thanks. And then where are we at with the park ranger? Are you in the process of finding one?
I do not want to jinx us. I have more information coming, but we do have a candidate that's in the background.
Okay. And then rabies, is that an issue you guys have had to address?
So we have had animals within the surrounding jurisdictions. We're currently not under an order to test animals. Once you receive a positive test animal, your area is considered by the the health department to have rabies in the area. And so Denver proactively does some inspections. Littleton was recently ordered and I believe had a positive reservoir species. I think it was a skunk. And then Jefferson County does proactive. We want to make sure there's been a lot of people that are going away from vaccinations for a variety of reasons. But our pets, it's been tried and true. It's been proven not to cause concerns. We want to make sure that we don't have those transmissions between animal and animal. But we also want to make sure that that doesn't jump and go to the human population or that humans are getting rabies. So we always make sure that when we're doing our enforcement and we're having our education and we go to Canine Corral, we make sure that everyone is up to date with their rabies vaccinations or they have proof of rabies vaccinations. It is a park rule for Canine Corral. And those folks that don't have proof, we always ask them to suspend their time there at the park for the day until they can provide some type of proof on them at all times. That is a requirement of the city of Inglewood so that they can participate. And that's just to mitigate the spread of rabies. We didn't see such a big concern 5 years ago, 10 years ago. And we never thought that we would have, like the East Coast, it's very rampant on the East Coast. Well, if you were to look at national mapping, you'll see this trend that it has come here. And we didn't think it was going to cross over the Rocky Mountains. We've now seeing it on the western side of the state. So it's here to stay. We just need to manage it and make sure that it does not spread to if you're not up to date with rabies and your animal is bit or encounters a reservoir species, being a skunk, fox, coyote, raccoon, bat, and you're not up to proper rabies vaccinations, it potentially you could be ordered to relinquish your animal, and we would have to do some testing on that animal, unfortunately. And that's out of our hands. That's with the state and the health department. We really want to minimize that trauma on any family. So any preventative measures that we can do is great.
Would that only be if there was actually like a bite incident, or would that be anytime you encounter someone who has a pet that like admits that they haven't vaccinated it?
It's kind of twofold. If they've had one vaccine in their life, the likelihood of transmission is very low. Vaccine studies typically don't go past the 3-year mark. That's a whole another story that I can give you another time as to why it's the 1 year and 3-year vaccinations. But anytime there's an encounter with the wildlife, you have the potential to transmit rabies from any kind of open wound. So if the animal not just bites, but potentially could scratch, they're constantly licking and doing stuff with their paws. So that can also be a transmission. And whenever there's an encounter between a human and one of these wildlife species, they are strongly encouraged by the health department to seek immediate care so that they can have post-exposure treatment.
When I was asking, I was wondering, you mentioned that there's the possibility or certain situations where someone's pet might be taken away.
Mhm.
Is that based on if just a normal officer encounter checking on someone like a canine corral? Or that would only be if there had been like an incident of a dog biting someone or something?
So we will not, regarding rabies transmission, we will only act on the authority of the health department if they order us to remove a dog because they're not able to prove vaccination. due to any type of bite, whether it's a bite on a person or whether it's a bite from a wild animal. So that's why we're trying to proactively make sure that people have their rabies vaccinations.
That makes sense. And then
Because if they
on,
do have if
Go
they
ahead.
do have rabies vaccinations or have had a rabies vaccination in their life, that animal, we can do a home quarantine for 10 days where they can stay within their own home, their yard. They just can't go anywhere because of the way the rabies transmits within that 10 days. It's scientifically proven if they have rabies and they've bitten another person or another animal, if their signs or symptoms, it would show up within that 10 days.
is it true that the only way to confirm rabies is to do like a brain sample of the pet?
That is correct. That's why if you do not get your pets vaccinated or have a vaccination history and they are bitten or encounter a conflict with a reservoir species, the health department will make you do one of two things. They will require you to pay for a quarantine at a quarantine facility for a minimum of 30 days, and it costs several $1,000s, where you have to relinquish your pet, and the health department will order it to be destroyed. And rabies can only be confirmed by a sample of brain tissue.
Okay, thank you. And then I think I had one more
Sorry,
question.
we got kind of sidetracked on that.
No, it's okay. I mean, that's all useful information. I think it's important for us to understand how you're dealing with that. On that page 12, the code enforcement calls for service. What's the difference between a citizen concern and a dispatch received?
They're both the same. It's
Okay.
just the way that we receive the call that we try and capture it, because dispatch captures calls as well for their statistics. And so they're pretty much the same. A citizen could be as simple as an email. It could be our Inglefix website. They could call in a complaint on our inspection line. So we just capture them differently by the way that they come into us.
And then in this system, is it like the old way where there's never two categories ticked for one case? Okay. And then I did have one more. What was it that caused so much more parking violations in 2020 compared to the other years? Am I seeing that?
So we were tasked due to concerns from council, concerns from the police department, to also help out with certain parking enforcement. And so if we were within our duties, we would take some of the parking calls. As you know, we've recently hired a new parking management officer. So we have 2 parking related people that are now taking those calls for service. We really were trying to provide a service to the community because the community was kind of angry, especially in some of our communities where parking is very tight. And so we were noticing that there were vehicles that had most of them are expired plates, not inoperable vehicles. That would be done by the police department, but a variety of different parking complaints, whether they're parking on the sidewalk, parking in the wrong direction. Expired plates was one of the bigger ones. And we don't usually do like the 30 days. These are significantly expired. And so we really want to make sure that our citizens are being respectful of that. And that was also pre-COVID. So you'll also notice a big drop in the parking enforcement.
Yeah, that's what I was asking about, because it was like 170 in 2020 and then
Yeah,
62, 46 in the
For
next
the
2 years.
last 2 years, the governor and the county and the Department of Motor Vehicle had asked that law enforcement agencies use officer discretion when working on expired vehicles and other vehicles that had registration concerns. As you know, most of them are closed, some reopened for appointments only, some weren't even doing online processing because they had no staff. And so we were really asked not to enforce those types of parking rules because it was of no fault of those vehicle owners.
Has that switched back to the old
has.
standard? Okay.
It has, and so we've started back doing enforcement with expired plates. When they announced that they were fully open, we kind of gave basically a 60-day window for people to try and go in and be proactive, either by requesting by mail, going to one of the convenient kiosks that are in multiple different supermarkets. So you don't have to wait in line at DMV or go to the DMV to get your registration updated.
Okay. Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions for Code Manager Lewis? Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And then, so Councilmember Russell is not here. So we won't have an update from her. And Member Johnson's not here. So Ms. Willis, do you have any insight on communications or anything around that? Or does anybody?
I'm sorry, I was getting my husband's plates ready. He's sick.
Oh, no worries.
So I missed the question. What was the
Oh,
question?
I was asking if you, since we haven't had Member Johnson give us any info on communications the last couple of meetings, I wondered if you had any insider information on that.
I have none. I can find out.
Okay, well, I mean, I'll go ahead and ask her, make sure I'm up to date on everything that she was in the middle of, or et cetera, since next meeting will be her last, assuming she's able to come. I did communicate with her to find out why she wasn't rejoining, and she has a new job, so she's got different responsibilities and can't participate anymore. Okay, so we don't really have any update on the communications. And then we didn't formally make any new business. I assumed we would dig into the next thing on our list, the dangerous dog stuff. So we'll just get into that as the unfinished business. And everyone, you know, I did put in those couple changes to the response to city council memo that we discussed in our last meeting, and that has been sent off. You can see what that looks like in the packet. But that's the same information we've already gone over. I did hear from City Attorney Niles, and she apologized and wanted to let us know that she hasn't been able to finish her response to all of the notes and questions that we provided on the recommended tree and shrub code ordinance updates, but that she would still be getting that done and getting that to us as soon as she could. She's clearly juggling a lot of responsibilities right now. So I let her know that that was fine, and we look forward to her response when she's able to get back to us on that. And then, so dangerous dogs, I'd like to ask Code Manager Lewis, can you, since it's been so long since we've talked about this and gone over this, can you kind of give us a high level on what we're looking at here, what is needed, what would help you, what we should be focused on?
So some of the things that were talked about specifically were those that might be outdated. And one was the identifying tag. That's something that we currently don't use. I know that you all had talked about possibly making some restrictions about using dog parks and or off-leash privileged areas. Dangerous dogs are not prohibited by park rules, but that's something that you all had talked about, and maybe looking at an alternative for identification, whether that be a certain leash or a vest. Those were the kind of the topics that we had talked about. I do want to let you know that the team here, and hopefully we'll be able to present this at some point in the near future, is currently in the process of reviewing Title VII, which is all of our animal laws. And I think they're going to try to, city attorney might be moving forward with some pieces. I know that one of the concerns is regarding barking dogs and how that's enforced. So we're wanting to make some changes to that and bring this forward. As far as the dangerous dog, it was done not too long ago. And it mirrors similar to what the state is. I think it's very well written, allows us to do what we need to. I think it's just cleaning up some of the language regarding some things that we currently don't offer or currently aren't doing.
And that's mainly on the identification.
That was the biggest concern. I think there were some notes done, and I apologize, I don't have that in front of me, where it was kind of talked about a few things. I know that Ms. Dickerson had some very, she had some differing opinions about what needed to be done. So I think the main thing is just making sure that if there's something that we're doing or not doing, we put in the microchip component. That's how we're identifying that dog versus a tag. And that's part of the dangerous dog permit, and that's outlined also in Title VII. So I'm not quite sure. I'm not seeing this as a problem. I think it was more just to make sure that we reviewed it. We went over how, which we did during one meeting, what we do when we encounter dangerous dogs, when do we impound dogs, how do we
Right.
go through that process. And so I think it was more of a review as to what our protocols were. And it seemed like everyone was very here, based off of the feedback, was happy with it, except for those things that we are not currently utilizing, which would be the tag or any kind of special identification.
Right. And then there had been discussion about the time gap between report of an incident and the, I guess, the controlling of, because I know former Chair Bowden, she had definitely some specifics around this that she was concerned about from her own experience. But I believe you addressed all of that pretty clearly when we went over it about what was and wasn't possible based on the court process.
Right. And we still, like you said, I know that victims of any crime, whether it's an animal bite or other crime, we still have to follow the due process. And it's not a fast process. And I don't think there's a way of speeding it up. We always put if we impound the animal, we always put it in to court within the next week. So every Wednesday. So if an animal bite was to occur today, next Wednesday, there would be an impound hearing. And then we typically try to set all cases, whether it's an impounded animal, and we issue a summons within 30 days. So we do faster than the county. If we were to actually write dangerous dog into the county, which we have the authority to do so, you're looking at 3 to 4 months before any of that. Usually within 90 days, they're advised of their speedy trial and their rights. But any kind of court case could take 18 months to 2 years in the county, versus here we've shortened that down depending on the type of case and how the plea is, to a few months to no more than a year at most if they requested a trial.
Has there been, outside of our committee discussion, as far as you're aware, public request for better identification of dangerous dogs?
No.
Okay. And then can you, what was I didn't quite follow you on the dog park restrictions. Is that around dogs that aren't residents of Inglewood?
No, I think this body has toyed around with the idea of somehow putting it into ordinance that any dog that has been adjudicated as dangerous be prohibited from utilizing any of our, I know somebody wanted to say a blanket all of our parks, but I don't think that is, I don't think that would be constitutional. That would be something you need to take up with the city attorney. But adjudicated dogs, because of the propensity, could be prohibited from, as they are in park rules already, outright prohibited from utilizing any of our off-leash privileged areas. And we have had a subject who was off-leash that did bite another animal and who had gone to other off-leash parks to utilize them. And so he wasn't outright prohibited from using the other parks until he went to court. We had a trial, and then the judge, as a condition, said you cannot, because the city asked for it not to utilize off-leash privileged areas.
So in that case, there was a prohibition of the park where the incident happened?
Yes.
And how did that, how was that enforced? Is that a code enforcement officer option?
It's not an option. So I should back up. We previously were allowed to do trespass notices, and I don't know if you're familiar with any of those process. They've been brought forward to council if you watch. Employees of the city, law enforcement officers could outright trespass people from certain locations, and it would be good for a year. That process has currently been found to be unconstitutional, and has been challenged. And so we have to reword it and rewrite it. And the city attorney has delivered it to the police department. It's a tool, and code enforcement and park rangers hopefully should be able to utilize that for those people that are habitual park rules offenders, who we know of being dangerous dog. It's just this one extra step that we have to take versus putting it into an ordinance. Therefore, it's a violation of Title VII.
Okay. And Ms. Willis, you might be the best to answer this. What is in our packet, the 7-1A-16 dangerous animals prohibited, is this the current code as it stands right now, or is this including some potential recommended edits?
No, it's the current code.
This is current code. Okay. And this is included because this has been kind of at the bottom of our unfinished business for a while, and we've discussed it, but we don't have specific modification language to review or recommend at this point. Is that accurate?
Are you asking me?
Yeah. I am.
No, you guys were going to come up with, the recommended issues that you wanted changed in code.
Right.
And what is listed here is what has been discussed. Muzzles, the visual identifier, dangerous dogs in parks, and communications on reporting dog attacks to code enforcement.
Okay.
So, I mean, that's up to you guys. You don't have to
Right.
change it if you don't want to.
Right. Well, I wish we had everyone who is still part of the committee, because I know that there's some strong concerns from others. This isn't an area that, I mean, I've participated in listening to the discussions, but it's not something I feel strongly about when Code Manager Lewis is telling us that it's not really a common request from citizens, but that, and really the only thing he sees, at least correct me if I'm wrong, Code Manager Lewis, but mainly you think that the identifier might be a good area to address, but you feel the way the code is now is sufficient for handling dangerous dog situations as efficiently as you think can be done?
Yes, my team and I have all conferred with this, and we all feel that this allows us to adequately do our job. Yes, there's a few things in there that we don't do, like issuing a tag, but in place of that, microchips are being done. Muzzling, that's an option that the judge can give as part of a condition. I don't know if that's something that, I have not seen that in code in other cities requiring that. And I don't know the legalities of the constitutionality of forcing you to muzzle an animal. And we're not, outside of the one person, we have not experienced anybody that's been adjudicated on a dangerous dog permit in the past. We haven't really seen behaviors that would lead for us to make a major code change, since it's not occurring or not a current condition.
Right. That makes sense. And then are you aware of what, why, because I don't remember the specifics on this. Under dangerous dogs, items to consider, we have communications on reporting dog attacks to code enforcement.
I do. So one of the concerns that we have is, and this is something when you get in place, back to regular staffing and you want to get a communications team together, that we can talk about some of the unwritten rules that are occurring within our off-leash privileged areas and the canine corral. I think a lot of people believe that you can just exchange information or have a wink wink and have a gentleman's kind of agreement that you'll pay for the medical bills and get things taken care of. And then a month down the road, we get a call from someone who said, well, yeah, we exchanged information and they're not paying for the bill like they said we agreed to. Well, then you've entered an agreement, a civil agreement to have your bills paid. I can take the report that there was a dog bite, but there's nothing further that I can do because you both already made the decision not to pursue charges and you both entered into an agreement to cover medical expenses. So that's kind of where our hands are tied. And so we want to make sure that people are reporting dog bites. One, we want to make sure that we follow the health protocols that are outlined with the health department in the state to make sure we don't have disease transmission. Two, we want to make sure that if an animal has repeat behaviors that we're capturing that. I know that member Johnson and she's given me permission in the past to freely talk about this case, and she's been very open. The concern that we have is the dog that was involved with her case. People knew this as a dangerous dog. People had come forward after the incident and said, oh yes, this happened to my dog, or oh yes, this happened to me. But code enforcement was never informed because there was a communication between the subject dog owner and the owner or person that was the victim, and never communicated to us. So we can't do enforcement on past things if we don't have a case. So we get into a very bad situation where the community is outraged and angry. And I really feel for Member Johnson and the community around her, because I know what it's like. As being a victim of a dog attack when I was younger, I completely.
Are you talking about Member Bowden?
Maybe Member Bowden. I'm sorry,
Okay.
not Member Johnson. Member Bowden and what was occurring with her. I empathize with the entire community. I was receiving phone calls from people that were just seeing it on Facebook or next door. But we can only take enforcement action on that specific case. If we had a previous history, the case would have been handled completely differently. That's where that's coming from.
So in your example of the unwritten rules, like people who have, dogs get involved in each other, dog gets bit, and they just work it out between them and they don't contact code enforcement right then. At what point is it not possible for one or the other of them to make a case?
They can always report a dog bite. We're a mandatory reporter. So any hospital, any place has to report the dog bite. It's what action do we take? If they agreed already between themselves that they weren't going to move forward with charges, that probably would not hold up in court because they already came to an agreement. You can't renege on something that you had agreed on and then pursue charges.
Interesting.
That
Okay.
Because if you go to a court and you had a jury and they said, okay, well, we agreed together not to pursue charges and we agreed to pay for bills, but now I'm taking my agreement back. You can't really do that because you've entered a civil agreement. But we'll take a case. They will just have to pursue the civil route in getting the restitution part.
I understand. And that's based on them having made an agreement. But if neither party is claiming that they made an agreement, then a case reported after the fact would be the same thing as if they stood in the park and called you.
Yep, we would still need to, like, for example, somebody might be too caught up with the moment to need to take their dog to the veterinarian clinic. And they're very traumatized about what happened. And it might be a day or two before they call us. We still have to collect the evidence. We'll have to get a vet report. We'll have to get a vet bill. We'll have to get pictures. We'll have to get witness statements. So we'd open a whole case and we'd move forward from there. But if you're looking at a month down the road and you had expectations, we even had a case where they're like, yeah, they gave me $100 on the spot and said, be quiet and then I'll give you some more money. And then they never do it. They've already entered into a civil contract with each other.
I understand. And then in regard to encouraging reporting, is there any communication currently in existence besides just the existence of code that encourages reporting for the community?
We haven't been doing communication, and this is where we have to tap dance around this very lightly, because as you know, the media can, even if we're putting something out, the perceived notion that we have animals running around chomping on people, we don't want to cause an undue panic. So we want to make sure that we communicate things with tact and finesse. We do have a new communications person full-time here at the police department. And so we're really taking on some more of those tasks. And so once you put that component in place, they can also work with our crime prevention community relations person here at the police department, not just general communications to relay this information.
Interesting. So it probably does not qualify as a good potential article in the Inglewood newspaper to report report
I-
animal incidents.
I always encourage people to report stuff. We don't want to do an article. I think it's more like, hey, these are the behaviors, and if something happened, like we like to use Flo, and we like to use Walter Wednesday, because who wants to beat up on a dog in a social media post to get information out that's one, informative and accurate and fun, but also provides a level of, hey, if you have inappropriate behaviors, please report this too. So we can come up with a proper way of communicating this, but I would say we would probably avoid a whole article on dog bites.
Okay. Are you aware of it ever being done before? Have we ever done that?
No, we have not.
Okay. Member Bowden just joined. Member Bowden, we're discussing the dangerous dog items to consider, possible changes in code. And I know that this is an area that you had some concerns. We know that visual identifier is kind of it seems to be the highest priority, because Code Manager Lewis sees that as a potentially valuable addition. And then we were talking about communication on reporting, and the discussion previously around dangerous dogs in parks. He's informed us that there's been very little situation of a dangerous dog being loose in other parks, and doesn't think that necessarily needs to be a law, since it's not, or a modification to code, since it's not a current issue. But I wanted to hear from, I'm glad you just joined, and I wanted to hear from you on any specifics you had that you wanted us to consider.
Hi, everybody. I didn't realize our meeting had been changed to Tuesday. So I scheduled my work to be off on Wednesdays. So anyway, I'm sorry about that. Yeah, so it was those two items. And then the third was the part that requires microchipping. That's in the code, but we don't require that anymore.
Oh, when you say it's in the code, but we don't require it, you mean it's not enforced anymore?
That's my understanding. The current code says that they have to get microchipped, and I don't think we require that anymore.
No,
Is that correct, Dave?
No, I think we're confusing the tag, which would be the little metal tag that you would hang on your collar.
Exactly,
We're doing
yep.
microchipping instead of the tag.
Yes.
So microchipping is happening,
Yes, it's part of the dangerous dog permit. It's required.
but
We're just not doing the metal
visual.
The metal,
Mhm.
right? Which we didn't think was a good enough identifier for a dangerous dog anyway.
Right, because we had talked about potentially a colored collar, colored leash.
A visual identifier that let others know that it was a dangerous dog. Yes.
Yeah. And are you aware, Code Manager Lewis, of standards around that in any other municipalities around?
I think there was some research done by this board. I'm not aware of any, because it's so difficult to identify a dangerous dog unless you put on a big giant leash or a vest that would identify an animal as being dangerous, which is, I think, why we had talked about potentially limiting their access to off-leash privilege areas. That was the conversation that I think this group was going in. Again, with adjudicated dogs, with the exception of what I had explained, we very rarely run into secondary problems associated with that adjudication, because we do require training before the case is completely done a year after their probation. We have certain requirements that they have to complete. And if they don't complete it or there's a second violation, the city strongly advocates for the animal to be euthanized. And I would say 90% of the time, the court grants our request.
Okay. So, as far as what we might pursue recommending, I mean, my hesitation would be pushing for a change right now when it sounds like, so you said that you are actively working with the city attorney to update the animal code in some regards right now.
So if you all are not aware, our city prosecutor left a few weeks ago, and she and I and another city attorney, we had all worked together in code division to put together a draft changes of Title VII, and we did send those forward to the city attorney's office. It is still with the city's attorney's office because there are so many other things that are being prioritized right now. And I can't speak fully for the city attorney's office. This is what I've been told, so I'm summarizing it. There are a lot of things that are coming forward that need to be addressed by the city attorney's office, that there's nothing majorly glaring in code related to animals that needs to be urgently fixed. So that's why it's kind of waiting. As you all know, you put forward some changes to impounds and how we serve all animals versus just dogs and cats, which has triggered part of this conversation with Title VII that still needs to be flushed out. The recommendation is from the city attorney's office is that we do little pieces at a time and not the whole Title VII at one time. I think it would cause too many triggers of other areas within the city. And so we're hoping, based on your recommendations also, if you say, okay, well, we would like to recommend, for example, having this struck from this part of the code, that would probably be something very easily done. But if you're going to do a major rewrite of any specific section and make recommendations, you can send those forward as well. The things that I'm seeing are more administrative requirements of the court and more administrative responsibility and accountability from the owners of animals. And those are kind of the big things that we put forward outside of barking dog. And again, you all, that would be something that you all could take up as a priority. And as you set things, is redoing the barking dog and how we enforce that and what the code says. I would say that would be our number one biggest complaint right now.
And what can you describe the current process?
So the current process is the way it's outlined in code, and I don't have everything in front of me to present, but basically a neighbor calls and says, hey, this dog's been outside barking for an hour. I'm tired of it. We usually will give a warning. Well, then they'll call again and say the dog's barking again today, and the dog's barking again a week from now, and they issued multiple reports. The code has that, it says neighborhood, so I can't observe the violation, one, because I'm not considered the neighborhood. And two, we have to have 2 or more independent witnesses from different residents report the violation in order for us to move forward with the summons. And so we have evaluated this and have found a way around this by making sure that the person who perceives a nuisance potentially could gather the evidence to present, whether that be video, recordings, pictures, Ring doorbell. They submit a manifest that could suffice for itself versus having the 2 independent people, because we get into the neighbor versus neighbor, he said, she said thing. But if we have corroborating evidence, then we would be able to move forward. So that's kind of one of the suggestions. And I know it's a frustration for council. They get emails frequently about barking dogs, and they understand the frustration that the community has and what we have from an enforcement standpoint.
And should that be, should a summons be made? What happens then?
So it's basically a fine. So they just like at large, instead of going to court, you would go to the counter in the Municipal Violations Bureau and you would pay a fine. Or if you wanted to contest it, you could request a court date to have that go forward with a trial.
And is it just the same fine over and over if they keep
No.
having?
So each violation has a different fine associated with it. And don't quote me because I don't have the exact numbers, and they're currently evaluating right now some of the court proceedings and processes, including the fine schedule, to work with the judge, because it's set by municipal code. The fine and fee schedule is set by the judge. So I think right now it's $100 for the first violation. The second violation is $200. The third violation, I believe, is, we haven't gotten to that point yet, is a mandatory court trial.
Okay. And of the recommendations that your team has put into the city attorney's office, is anything around that already in there?
That was the recommendation that we did make that recommendation.
Okay, so that's already being considered. So we
It's
don't
being
really,
considered. I don't know how soon it would be brought forward, and perhaps you all can ask. That's something that you all can put forward and maybe work towards.
okay. And then member Bowden, do you have more thoughts on what, because I know this is an important topic for you and I don't want to neglect it. What do you want to see happen? What would you like to potentially be moved forward, knowing that they've already got some things being considered? Do you think that it would be a good idea for us to raise certain points to a higher level of concern at this point? What do you think?
Well, I think the biggest issue was making sure that others knew that a dog was dangerous
Okay.
with the visual identifier. And I didn't hear that as a topic being considered. Sorry, I'm at a golf course, so if it's loud, I'm sorry. And I don't have my notes with me either. So, by the way, I work at a golf course. I'm not playing golf.
Yeah, I'm sorry you didn't realize it was tonight. We rescheduled it for tonight so that we could have code manager Lewis, because he's gone tomorrow and on vacation, I believe. That's why in our last meeting, we voted to make it tonight, but we're not like permanently switching it to tonight. Okay, so does anyone else have any thoughts on this? Any other members want to discuss visual identifier, thoughts on that? What kinds of recommendations we might include to the city attorney office or city council, or even, I guess we could potentially offer suggestions to you, code manager Lewis, to include in the things that your team has put forward? Or would it be better that we treat ours separately?
So as of right now, I would highly recommend that this body move forward independently of what we have submitted, only because it is stalled, and the recommendation of the city attorney was to piecemeal some of these forward.
Okay.
So if you feel that this needs to be addressed, maybe that's something that needs to be rewritten completely, not rewritten, but just maybe
Re-brought up, sure.
These
And especially if you're hearing so much about the dog barking thing, then that would be a good thing for our citizen committee to potentially bring some attention to.
And that's always been a problem here in Inglewood. It's just the way that we address it, I think, needs a refresh.
Okay. Any other thoughts? Vice Chair Watson, Member Strom, Member Redevid?
No, I guess my only question would be if is there a real need for this? I mean, are we seeing this as a problem that people are saying they don't see dangerous dogs that they know are dangerous?
I have not received that feedback, but I would pose this to all of you. If you are out walking your dog or you are out with your kids playing, would you feel better knowing or seeing some type of a signal of a dog that may potentially be dangerous? I know that some people take that upon themselves to use red leashes and stuff, and that's supposed to be a signal outside of them just saying, don't approach my dog. And that's kind of been the unwritten rule throughout the country. But what would be more of a peace of mind if you, and I think I haven't counted recently, the 9 to 10 adjudicated dogs. Would it give a peace of mind knowing that if you are in a park and you saw somebody walking a red leash dog, you would know, okay, well, this dog needs to be, I'm aware that this dog cannot be approached. But then you also have to look at it from the standpoint of how would the owner feel being forced to basically put a scarlet letter on their animal. And again, we have to take responsibility, but it's based off of what the community perceives and what the community is wanting. And I haven't heard anything. I don't think the cases that we've had recently, they're all first-time people.
They're all what?
First-time offenders. They're not repeat offenders. So,
But it only takes one offense to become adjudicated, right? Or does it?
yes, it depends on how the court process. I don't adjudicate the animal. It has to be done through the courts.
Right. But, and then once it's been adjudicated, is there a time limit on that? Like if they don't have any incidents?
They have 1 year of the probation, we call it probationary period, just for simplification, but they do have a process that they do follow before their court case is closed out. But it's 2 years for the dangerous dog permit.
Okay,
So
so,
for 2 years, we follow them.
so if we were to make an identifying rule, like a red leash or whatever, then it would probably follow when they're adjudicated through their adjudication, and then it would go away after that case is closed if they don't have any more incidents for 2 years.
Correct.
Okay. Is that what you're thinking we should do? Remember, Bowden? Did you have, go ahead, Member Strom.
Yes. I really feel like it needs to be a large visual signal because I have had a reactive dog before in the past. And back then they said, tie yellow ribbons on your leash. Nobody knew what that was for. And I would like to see things because if you're walking down the street and you're looking at the other dogs, you don't know which ones are going to be reactive unless the owners are being very aware of the other people around them. And so I do think like a vest, something big would really help because then it warns the other people, children or vet owners, pet owners that, yes, my dog needs a lot of space. Please don't approach us. My dog is very reactive. So I think that would be really beneficial in our community because probably I live close to you and I would say 70–80% of the people in the neighborhood have a dog. And we all want to get along and we all want to respect each other's space. But I think it would help with communication.
Okay. Vice Chair Watson?
Yeah, I guess my question there would be, are you asking that we put like a vest that says dangerous dog? And
yes, or just like a bright yellow one, or say caution, please give me space.
But
something that identifies that the animal needs, don't approach and don't come close.
So, and the reason I'm asking is because, and maybe it's just my personal belief, but I believe that like 99% of the people, if we just say, okay, it's a red vest, they might guess that that's the reason, but they won't know unless they have code or have read the codes. Unless then afterwards we do like a PR kind of thing that says, hey, dangerous dogs have this.
No,
on them.
that's true. They could do like a little PR piece in the Inglewood Citizen, just like how they do for Flow on Instagram, Facebook, Nextdoor. And I think that really gets like 75%, 80% of the citizens. I think a lot of people do pay attention to those things.
My fear would be that we would institute something and then nobody would know what it is and it would make no difference. I mean, if we're
Member
gonna.
Redovid? Oh, sorry.
No, no,
Vice
that's
Chair
fine. You're
Osmer.
good. Thank you. Thank you.
Member Redovid?
My question was, I'm just not really understanding. So if these individuals have a dog, they get in trouble for it, they're told they have to put this indicator on their dog. There's no recourse for reinforcing this. It's an honor system. So you only find out they're not doing it unless there's until there's a second offense and someone's already injured. So I'm just not sure like regulating makes any sense other than offering it as a tool to anyone in the community who might want one, because it needs to be done voluntarily because there's no recourse or additional penalty if they don't do it, from what I'm understanding.
That's interesting. Well, if it was put into code, I mean, it could be put in with an enforcement element, right? Code Manager Lewis, I mean, if it became the rule that if you had an adjudicated dog, they had to have some visual indicator, and a code enforcement officer encountered an adjudicated dog that wasn't, where the owner wasn't following that rule, then that would fall into whatever fine is defined in the ordinance, right?
Yeah, and with that specifically, we would issue a summons into court because they're in violation of the dangerous dog ordinance. It could be put in for keeping or harboring a dangerous dog. We do have, it basically would be a violation if they didn't do something. And I just wanted to give you an update. So we have 7 adjudicated dogs that are coming off adjudication this year. And then we have, because it'll be the 2 years. We have 11 that will expire next year and 1 the following year.
Okay. Does that answer your question, Member Redovid, in regard to enforcement?
Yeah, I guess just additionally, I'm just not understanding how it's a effective use of resources in such a small number, and the chance that you won't really know, like an officer's not going to be going around to the park checking papers to make sure all the dogs are not supposed to be wearing vests, from what I understand. It's not like people check in on these dogs unless there's an incident, right?
In most cases, I think that's true, but in the beginning of this meeting, Code Manager Lewis told us how right now, code enforcement officers are doing, I don't know what you'd call it, a sweep of canine corral and other places, checking for rabies tags. So, I mean, if you are doing things like that, it would be possible to address this same thing. Although I totally get the point about this is a very small number of possible incidents, and it's not something that people are reporting as a problem. Code Manager Lewis, is that accurate?
I have not received, or my team received, complaints. Any dangerous dog has to go across my desk. So I have not heard any complaints or concerns related to the identification of dangerous dogs. I hear both sides of this equation. I hear from one side, what are we going to do from enforcement? Would it just be a neighbor saying they're not using their leash? Would it be, okay, well, they're not complying as part of their permit because we know these dogs? Do we see them at a park? I think you guys need, again, we have no reported cases that I can speak about.
But specifically on Member Redovid's question about how it would be even identified, would it be something, I mean, it does sound like there's so few of these that the code enforcement officers are probably familiar with most of the cases and most of the dogs, right? And if you encounter them at the park in normal, currently you're, at least in some situations, at the parks checking rabies tags, you mentioned,
Well,
right?
we're at the parks always doing selective enforcement. I don't like using the word sweep because then
Right, sorry.
conjures up deep, dark secrets of the Nazis. And I don't like to equate us with that because we're looking at health and safety of the community.
I apologize.
It's okay. I know it was the only word you could come up with. We do selective enforcement. And when we are at the parks, we look for a variety of things when we're encountering. Canine Corral is one of those that we've been asked. There's been lots of conversations on social media sites that we monitor where we feel like we need to have more of a presence because it seems like it's more of a free for all kind of situation. And so part of our responsibility and why we go down there to have an interaction, we can ask for a rabies tag at any time. It's called an administrative inspection under the law. And so we can force an interaction between two people. I shouldn't say force, have an interaction regarding a regulatory aspect. And so if we were to encounter one of those animals, which we know, I don't know, again, if these animals, I would say most of the users at Canine Corral are not Inglewood citizens. They come from other jurisdictions. I don't know what their adjudication status might be in Littleton, Sheridan, anywhere in Jefferson County and incorporated Arapahoe County. I don't know the status of their animal.
Okay, that all makes sense. Just to put this out there, one other thought I have is I know some dogs that wearing a vest, especially during the summer, would be, hot and potentially prohibitive. And that's why I was thinking that a red leash or something like that, that's not necessarily going to be something a dog has to wear, might be more reasonable. I don't know if, I understand the vest would be the most obvious thing, but it's also not something that there's been reports about this being a problem. So we're being pretty proactive on even, making a recommendation in this vein anyway. So I would be hesitant to personally to want to do something as strong as requiring a vest, when I know lots of dogs don't like to wear anything. And lots of dogs can be very hot, in the way it gets around here, just with their fur. So I don't know, Member Strom, is that something that you would like consider at all?
That's true. Maybe some type of print on the leash or something, or the vest could even be made out of mesh, so it could have airflow. But just, I can see your point.
I know my last dog, if I put a vest on him, he'd never stop trying to rip it off. Like he'd be
Okay.
miserable.
Yeah. And when I did have a reactive dog, I just didn't take him to a park. I
Right.
walked up and down Broadway, and he loved homeless people. So that was my solution. Keep him away from the other dogs.
Well,
Sure.
so I want to look at this from the standpoint, and I apologize for interrupting.
Oh, no problem.
You guys are thinking problem solving this together way outside the box, and I greatly appreciate that you're looking at all aspects, not just the one viewpoint. So I appreciate that. I get where you're all coming from, and the vest and the identifier, and trying to make this equal. We have to also make sure that we do it in the good spirit of the ordinance and what the community might want. And we want to focus in code enforcement on responsible ownership and focus on the behavior of the animal, which is why we've never prohibited certain species, because it's based off of the behavior of the animal and behaviors of the owner. So a leash might be a reasonable solution because you can control that. You can even require that it's issued by the city at a cost to the consumer. Like there's a variety of things that you could consider when moving this forward.
Member Redvid?
I was going to say that in between might be a leash wrap. They make leash wraps that say like, please don't pet my dog, I'm anxious, or could say I'm aggressive. And those could go on any existing leashes, and they're usually like a bright color. The other thing I was going to say is it might be more helpful to, instead of taking a punitive approach, to make it kind of an encouraging thing that available to everyone. So people that also have aggressive dogs that maybe wouldn't have put an indicator on before because they didn't know it was an option, people would do it ahead of time instead of just doing it at the point where they get in trouble. So if maybe we took the approach of not necessarily making it a rule, but encouraging it as an option, if you were doing some kind of outreach campaign like you talked about, that might be approach, because people respond better sometimes to encouragement versus feeling like they have to do it.
That's an interesting point. Thanks for sharing that. I like that. Code Manager Lewis, would there be any downside if we made it more of a recommendation? And it became a mix of adjudicated dogs and, I guess, as Member Strom called them, reactive dogs that people wanted to identify?
I think there is an opportunity for this board to come up with some universal standards and research this. And maybe we could come up with some funding, some community resource funding here to potentially hand some of those out to the community. And then that way, and work with our shelters too. So our shelter staff have the ability to also hand those out if needed. That rather than I know how our community feels about rules and putting a lot of unnecessary stuff out there. Perhaps this is a good alternative. We could always make it as part of the permitting process because that's not required under ordinance. We could make it as an administrative based on you could make the recommendation, a formal recommendation to the city attorney that we consider this as part of the administrative process to issue a permit, but they have a red leash. And that could be at whatever size fits their appropriate animal. That could be part of the language. And we could verify that they have that leash when we do our dangerous dog permit.
When you say permit, you mean for an adjudicated dog?
Yes, so we're required to do an inspection. We do periodic inspections to make sure they're compliant with the permits. That could be part of the administrative permit process versus putting it into ordinance.
And where do the administrative permit rules come from?
Those are set here by the city. So outside of the microchip, they have to have postings. They can't get out of a escape-proof yard. We have certain requirements, and that could be one that could be part of the administrative process.
Member Bowden?
I thank you. I know there was discussion on whether or not some type of identifier, whether it be a leash or a collar or a vest, seemed punitive, but we do require those people to have signage on their home that says there is a dangerous dog that lives there. And I just think this is kind of part of the same circle that says people need to be notified that they're in the area of a dangerous dog. And while I get that a vest would be cumbersome, I don't think my dog would wear it either. I think a leash that has markings on it is not unreasonable to request.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's reasonable. I'm wondering if, based on what Code Manager Lewis just told us, if that becoming part of the permitting process, if maybe we recommend it become part of the permitting process and not necessarily require a change to the ordinance. I'm not totally clear on if we can have any influence on that, or if that would be sufficient for everyone's concerns.
I believe that if this body takes the consensus and wants to send forward a memo to the city attorney that you would like to make, see if it would be more appropriate to put this identifier in code, or if it could be simply put into the administrative process as part of the dangerous dog permit requirement, that would be up to this committee to put that forward through the city attorney's, through your liaison to the city attorney's office. Or you can even just ask the city attorney to review this and then get back with you. Maybe Maureen can chime in on that one.
Yeah, Ms. Willis, would we go direct to city attorney on that, or would we go through city council member Russell?
Well, first off, Dave, how is your administrative policies changed?
So the policy is basically set off of code, and then we had adopted some minor requirements with dangerous dog. I would.
If you wanted to change the administrative policies, who do you go to change them?
I would ask for clarification with the city attorney.
Okay, I'd go straight to the city attorney. You're not asking to change code. You're just asking for one small requirement to be added to administrative policies. So yeah, I think you could go straight to the city attorney.
Well, and we'd actually, based on what Code Manager Lewis described it as, I mean, we could pose it as a question to the city attorney, whether she thinks it's more appropriate to deal with it as administrative permit process, or if it really warrants going into code. Member Bowden?
This actually, why don't you guys finish this conversation? I just had a follow-up point from when we had previously discussed it, but it's not related to the leash. So go ahead and finish. I'll wait.
Okay. I'd like to get a sense of how everyone feels about this. Are we on the same page to ask the city attorney whether she feels it would be more appropriate to make a change to the administrative process for permitting adjudicated dogs to require a visual identifier leash, whether it's a bright, I'm just suggesting, we can always refine what this is, but some form of bright colored leash or wrap, like the example that member Redivid just sent us in the chat, something that's a visual identifier at the leash level. And whether city attorney thinks that that would be best to be an addition to, or a modification to ordinance, or just in the administrative permitting process. Does everyone like that approach? Does anyone want to modify that? I see nods from member Strom, member Bowden, Vice Chair Watson seem good. Member Redivid, you on board with that?
Yes.
Okay, then I'll work with Ms. Willis to draft something to send to the city attorney on that, and then we can have that in our next packet to approve to send out. And unless anyone feels like that needs to be fast tracked any faster than that. Okay, then member Bowden, you had something to follow up with?
Right, and because I wasn't present at the last meeting and I was actually listening to the recording so I could catch up. Member Dickerson was pretty adamant that we require muzzles on all dogs when they're not in their yard. Have we come around to talk about that again?
It was mentioned earlier, and Code Manager Lewis said that he wasn't aware of any other jurisdictions having that in ordinance. But do you want to address that any further, Code Manager Lewis?
No, I would highly advise that based on my training experience, that would not be something that would be considered.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure that we considered that so that when Ms. Dickerson listened to this or read the minutes, she knew that we did cover it.
Were there any of the other points that you wanted to go into any further, Member Bowden?
No, I went through all my notes while we were sitting here, and I think we covered everything up to this point. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah, thank you. So then I'll make like I said, and then we'll have that for review for next time. So that, unless anyone has anything else, I think that completes our discussion on dangerous dogs at this point. And oh, go ahead, Ms. Willis.
It's not on dangerous dogs, but I was just wondering if Code Manager Lewis had an update on the bird flu.
Oh, good question.
It is flying through the state of Colorado, and we are seeing a slight decrease throughout the Midwest as our migratory birds have currently mostly passed over us and are on their way to bright and sunny Canada.
So there's not any local birds that we know of that are.
No, I haven't had any new updates or new major infections, and a major infection would be 3 or more birds coming down at the same time.
Go ahead, Ms.
So-
Willis.
So is it safe to put our bird feeders back out?
I would say, since most of the migratory birds that would have caused infection, feed away.
Cool. Thanks for the question. That's useful info.
Yeah, songbirds are not affected. It's only waterfowl and raptors and chickens. So songbirds, I just sanitized everything, so. Songbirds are great. No problem.
What about doves?
Um, no, I don't believe doves are affected in that group as well.
Thanks, Member Strom. Okay, so we'll close out of unfinished business and move into topics for future meetings. Our next normal date would be the 15th of June. And it was suggested that we meet in person since this will be the last meeting for some of our members, and we could, you know, see each other in person and recognize their contribution to the community as, you know, their time on this committee. Is anyone opposed to meeting in person on the 15th of June? Member Redovid?
Would a remote option still be possible? I have some immunocompromised people in the house.
Okay, it was suggested to possibly even do it in a park. And if we did that, no, but if we wanted to do it in one of the city facilities, then I believe hybrid is an option. Is that true, Ms. Willis?
That is correct. And I also would prefer not to meet in person because I'm dealing with COVID right now.
Okay, so then are we able to definitely have access to a city room with a hybrid environment next time?
I'll check and let you know.
Okay, so let's plan for that unless we hear back that that's not possible, and then we'll deal with it once we find that out. But for now, we'll plan on meeting in a hybrid at the whatever room at the city center that's available. And that'll be on June 15th. And since this section is topics for future meetings, I'd like to also open it up. If there are, you know, since we're waiting on city attorney for the updated tree and shrub ordinance, ongoing discussion. We know what we're going to do next for dangerous dogs. Are there any other areas of code that Code Manager Lewis or any other members are aware of that they would, you know, aware of citizen interest that we should review or think about digging into?
I know that I would request, like we talked about today, having a conversation about barking dogs
Okay.
or habitual barking dogs.
Yeah, then let's put that in our new business for next meeting. What's the best way to communicate that to you, Ms. Willis? Should I just do it offline or should we do it in the meeting like this?
No, like this is fine. I write it down and then I put it on.
Okay, so we'll have barking dogs in new business.
Would
Go ahead.
it be possible just to possibly have a shortened meeting next time? I really would like it to take a moment to thank those members, and we have 3 members that would be leaving us next month. I really would like it to take a more of a personal, for those that feel comfortable meeting in person, more of a personal approach with having a quick meeting, and then I would like to take a moment to recognize those accomplishments that this group has done, and to really thank those members who have contributed their time as they leave us.
I think that's perfectly fine. I don't think we're going to need much time, especially since we've already kind of talked through barking dogs, but we'll just formally, you know, that gives everyone a chance to look into any other thoughts on that to bring to the table when we talk about it next time. And we don't really have much else to discuss anyway, so I think that's reasonable. Vice Chair Watson?
Was there anything we still needed to discuss on the emerald ash?
Well, that's part of the tree and shrub code recommendations that we're waiting to hear back from the city attorney on her feedback for all of the notes that we gave her on the new code draft. So, I mean, we can proceed unless someone else has something that I'm not thinking of, but that's where I see that as being right now.
I was just asking because it's that time of year and I didn't know if there was anything we needed to discuss.
I think that it's already pretty well covered by the city communications staff at this point. I think they're communicating it well through the citizen newspaper and social media. So I don't believe we need to do anything else on that right now, but maybe member Bowden would have more info on that. And you have your hand raised anyway.
I'm sorry, can you rephrase that you were looking for what?
Well, just Vice Chair Watson was wondering if there was anything outstanding that we should be doing regarding Emerald Ash Borer right now.
No, I don't know where we landed with the program recommendation. But that
Well, we
was-
sent our response to City Council, and then that's where that, and then we're also waiting on City Attorney to respond to the notes we gave her in the last meeting.
Right. I think the only other thing we had was communications, but the communications department at the city has really taken over that aspect of it and has been on top of it. I don't know if you guys saw in the latest Inglewood Citizen magazine, there was a ad in there for the program for those that are impacted by EAB to get the funding for assistance. So I don't think that we have anything left there to do. They know to contact member Green, not member Green, member Johnson. I guess my other question is if they do want to talk to somebody about communications from our group, who would they speak with? Would that be you, Carson?
I mean, I guess until we form another, I'm getting a lot of echo, form another subcommittee or assign someone else to that, then that's fine. Are you in contact with them right now?
I am not. I know that Monica has been.
I already said earlier, I'm going to reach out to her and feel out where that's at and establish that communication line.
Okay. You had asked if there were any other topics.
Yeah.
And I was trying to send a document. We had created a list of priorities for 2022.
Oh, that's true. So we should go on.
Yeah, so I mean, you might want to pull that. The other thing is that we were supposed to review our bylaws, and I don't know if you guys did that last month.
We did not. Most of the meeting went to the discussion with the city attorney last time.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, but good point. I'll review the priorities and probably include that in for the next meeting. Based on what Code Manager Lewis just requested, I don't want to take up the next meeting with going through the bylaws.
Yeah.
But maybe we'll schedule that for the next one.
Okay.
And then that would also kind of make sense because hopefully that next one will have new members as well.
Sure.
Did you have anything else?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, now it's committee members' choice anyway. So does anyone have anything else? All right, then go ahead, Member Bowden. You're muted.
I know where I've been, but where is everybody from our committee? I mean.
Yeah, we're missing Member Johnson.
And Dickerson is Cohen okay?
Member Dicker, I did check my email and she said she had some throat thing going on. So
Okay.
that's why she's not here tonight.
Okay, okay. All right.
Yeah, she
Well,
said,
I apologize. For the past 2 meetings, I have 6 years of perfect attendance. I really messed this up. I'm so sorry.
well, I'm glad you made it today. That was very helpful. I
just-
was missing you last time, but
So sorry.
that's okay. Yeah, hopefully you've had a chance to look at it because it was a good discussion with the city attorney.
I'm about halfway through the meeting, so
Cool.
I was re-listening to it.
All right. Then we'll see everyone next month. Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Oh,
you.
one quick thing.
Oh, go ahead.
Anybody have any allergies or gluten concerns? I know that Councilmember Russell, I think, might not eat gluten, but I'll check with that. Fair game for food or anything for next trip, the next meeting? Sonia?
No dairy and no gluten. I'm really terrible.
No ice cream for you.
No ice cream for me. I'll pass. I'll
Okay.
just, don't worry about me. It's good. My life.
I will make sure that we have appropriate gluten-free, vegan, dairy-free items. So I will have water for you all.
Well, yeah, water and some celery
I'm
sticks.
totally
I'll
just
be
kidding.
happy.
No, I will come up with a variety of things for everyone, because we never do this as a group, and we have 3 amazing people that have contributed so much to this team, that I want to make sure that we recognize them. I want to make sure that we recognize all of your contributions that you have contributed over the last year, the amazing things that this body's done. And I really want to just take a moment for us to see each other, to hear each other, and to be in a space together where we can celebrate the things that we've accomplished.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Code Manager Lewis. And Vice Chair Watson, you had your hand up? Oh, okay. All right, then we're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.